Welcome, Michael, to Uncommon Medicine, and our first recording ever in this awesome new studio space that I'm been grateful to be able to find. I know you're traveling a little bit right now too, and I look forward to having this discussion on your journey to finding this water that's actually repairing people and making our lives better. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's just get right down to the middle of this. First and foremost, I have a fascination with frequencies, especially the frequency of sound, and healing frequencies, quantum physics. I want to geek out with this with you quite a bit. And what really attracted me to the work that you're doing is how it first was in the foundation of frequency and the science of frequencies. Can you just elaborate more on, kind of where you studied, in the fascination that you had with frequency, what kind of frequencies, how that led you down to the path to then finding the frequency of water? Tell us some more about that.
Okay. So when I look back, it becomes clear that the journey has been, I wouldn't say linear, but certainly directional. And I'm trained, believe it or not, as an economist, in particular, a mathematical economist called an econometrician. And so, I did a lot of work in that area, both at the university level and then in the private sector at AT&T Bell Laboratories. And on the surface, that's not anything to do with frequency immediately, but along that journey, I became an avid music lover, okay? And then made a segue out of the corporate world into a high-end audio store in New York City in the late 1980s called Hobson Ultimate Sound. And of course, there we're firmly in the world of frequencies, acoustic frequencies through air. And that led me to a number of businesses over the last 33 years, 11 in all, one of which was a company called Classic Records, which was a vinyl record company that really is widely credited as being part of the vinyl revival and really bringing vinyl back in those days in the early 90s. I started that company in 1994. So here we go from mathematics, which is the basis for frequency, through audio and then into vibratory patterns in polyvinyl chloride, which when reproduced makes sound, right? And a lot of those sounds turn out to be human voice or the voice of instruments, right? And so I sold that company in 2010, been involved in a number of other businesses, but around that time, maybe even a little before 2010, I started, I had an idea, and I don't know where the idea came from, that I was going to do something with regard to water. And to make a long story short, I delved into it and have been guided ever since to the place where I'm at now. And we can get into in a minute how frequency relates to that in this very special water that comes from this sacred spring in southern Idaho.
That's exactly where I want to go. I mean, one of my first exposures and sort of mind-opening experiences for how water can alter our consciousness, have an impact on our thoughts, was done by Masaru Emoto.
Of course.
Who would put an intention into the water, like you would pray or say grateful or say something positive versus something negative, like hateful or something bad and systemic, and then take a picture of the water once it was frozen.
That's right.
And it was just stark contrast in beauty and structure and geometry, and when you actually had these higher frequency words. And by higher frequency, I mean those that are more positive and closer to, to human development rather than destruction, right? And so that was a huge moment for me as a mind opener. What was one of those game-changing discoveries that you discovered when you were on this water journey and finding out how frequency and water interact?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the Emoto work, and I think it really does lay the basis for this notion of what's referred to as structured water, right? If we look into our bodies, as an example, the water in our bodies is not normal water. It is structured water. It is crystalline water. And the way we know that, by the way, is if you cut yourself, you don't just spew like a water hose, right? The water in our bodies gets structured and in a way that is more like a gel. In fact, I really picked up on this work from probably the most renowned water scientist, a guy called Gerald Pollack, who is at the University of Washington, who's a good friend of mine. I've known him for close to a decade now. And, we've had a lot of interactions, and he really found out that water, when it is subjected to different interfaces with the air, with biological molecules and so forth, it actually changes its structure, especially at that interface, and becomes ordered. And there's a term that he coined called EZ water, exclusion zone water. So the water around, for example, DNA or proteins is very highly structured. And they also found that structured water is able to absorb frequencies of light. And remember, everything is a frequency in the light spectrum, right? All the way from acoustic energy through electrical energy into infrared, into gamma rays, and so on.
Yes.
And so it turns out that this structured water in our bodies, this EZ water, is able to absorb in the 3 micron range. And that's the range at which DNA and proteins absorb. So you start to get the idea that water is this really important part of our biology and our function, right? It goes way beyond this notion of hydration, right? It really becomes a way for our cells to communicate with each other through this ordered, structured water. When they communicate either vibratorily, which they do, or photonically with light.
Yes.
Okay. It then starts to make some sense to me anyway, and I think others, as to why when we become elderly, that we have so many dysfunctions. And I like to tell the analogy that when we're born, we're about 85% water by volume. When we die, or when we get to old age, we're about 65% water by volume. So you could think of the process of aging as one of dehydration, to put that term into place, right? Less water by volume. But if you think about water and the structured water in our body being the basis, the medium, if you will, through which communication happens between the cells, now you've got less water, less structured water, less communication, more things break down. And I think that's exactly what we observe.
That's fascinating. What about, I'd like to separate this just a little bit, because just from the perspective of biochemistry and doctorly speak, if someone comes to me and I find that they're dehydrated, right? This could be comes of electrolyte imbalances and a variety of other things, that they're just not actually uptaking the water, or the water that they're drinking is completely inert and is actually leaching things from the cell and from the body. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by hydration and how we can maintain that?
Yeah, so that's an important issue. And, there is a school of thought out there that I recognize, don't subscribe to, but I understand the approach, where people drink distilled water. So water that has no mineral content whatsoever. And of course, water in that state is what is referred to as very active water. And that is that it tries to leach everything that it comes in contact with, right? The so-called universal solvent. And in fact, that's what happens in our body, right? It's like it extracts minerals from us, and then we urinate or sweat those out. So the mineral content of water is actually pretty important. And I think that's why, for example, it's commonly held that drinking spring water is probably the best thing for us, right? Because it does contain trace minerals, which are important for other functions in our body. And in fact, it leads me to this issue of what is one of the things that's so special about this water, and that is that it has a high silica content. And silica is one of those trace minerals that is absolutely critical to our functioning and our health and well-being. And that's true of plants, animals, and humans, by the way. So just to spend a few minutes on that, it turns out that silica, which in its most common form is sand, right, and also is the basis for semiconductors, you might recall.
Right. That's why it's a Silicon Valley.
Silicon wafers, right? And so again, we're back to a trace mineral, which I think is important in creating this structured water in our body. And so that we, in effect, become a semiconductor, a giant semiconductor. And that's how the communication
fascinating
in our body works.
Okay.
Now, guess what? Remember, I said before that the process of aging is really you could equate it to a dehydration. That is, at least the volume of water we are when we're in old age. It turns out that we also lose silica over that period of time. So if I could say and I wish I had known this when my parents were still alive, what I would certainly think would be something that the elderly should be cognizant of is a silica-rich diet, both in terms, where does silica come from? It comes from plants and vegetables and fruits, anything that uptakes things from the soil. Because remember, an important fact that I didn't know actually, and that is that the first most prevalent element in the Earth's crust is oxygen. Who knew? Wow. Second most prevalent, silica.
Really?
Third most prevalent, aluminum. So just keep those, it's kind of interesting, keep those in mind. Those are the top three most prevalent elements in the Earth's crust. Right, so plants are taking up silica all the time, right? And it's part of the structure of what they produce and so on, right? So it turns out silica in our body is the basis for hair, teeth, bones, collagen, part of our extracellular matrix. It's important for digestion, for gut health. Silica actually embeds in the arteries and veins in our body and helps with blood flow. And I'll talk about this in a minute, it binds to aluminum. And we'll come back to that in a second. But back to the old guys, right? What is true of people who are elderly? A number of things. One is that they have digestive issues. They have circulatory issues. They have wound healing issues. They have skin issues. They have bone issues. They have extracellular matrix issues.
Yeah.
Is there a connection with silica and the loss of it? There has to be. right? I'm not suggesting it's the only thing, but it's an important thing. And I'll just leave this discussion, unless you want more, with the idea that while you can get silica from food stuff, and I just mentioned vegetables and fruit, the problem is that the bioavailability of it is only about 50%. So our gut's only able to extract about 50%. On the other hand, silica that's in water is 80% bioavailable. So if you're thinking of a way to get silica into your diet, it's probably best using water.
Get from a water source. Okay, so you just downloaded so much goodness
Sorry.
on us. No, don't you ever apologize for giving excellent information. Not on this show.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to piggyback on this one a little bit from a source that I know of. From he's an excellent researcher. He's a quantum physicist. And a good friend. His name is Dr. James Oshman, and he wrote a book called Energy Medicine. And
I'm very aware of his work.
Okay, so everything you're talking about he talks about collagen fiber. So basically anything that's not a bone, a muscle, a nerve, or a blood vessel, all the rest of the stuff that keeps our body together, right? That's all collagen based. And so what you're saying right now is silica, which is like the Silicon Valley, right? Where semiconductors, he found, and his colleagues years ago found that our bodies are like a semiconductor. They act in the same way. So that's why when they did these studies with like acupuncture, for example, where the acupuncture point for eyes is actually in the foot. And when someone was in a functional MRI machine, they put the acupuncture point in the foot, and the occipital lobe, which is what your eyes are connected with, it lit up in microseconds, like immediately.
Totally.
But when somebody looked at something, it took 3 seconds for the lobe to really light up in the same amount that the semiconductor would with the act, so everything that you're saying here, I'm just seeing all these different years. I use cold laser therapy, and you're using light in the infrared spectrum. It amplifies the body to heal faster. So all of these things are working together. I'm seeing like all these different corners coming together with every different piece you were saying. So I'm just, my mind is just getting so blown away with how I didn't have this little tiny piece, like I've been talking about these things and helping my patients with them for years. So the silica is such an obvious component now to me, and definitely something I want to focus more on and bringing into my diet. And I'm still so fascinated with how you found out all this information now too. I mean, with just my background in science, can you, how did you discover this natural spring in Idaho? Like what is that story about?
I didn't discover it. It discovered me.
Well, fair enough.
And I mean that sincerely. In fact, I refer to myself as a water shepherd. So
I love that.
Yeah, let me just give you a little context. Having been in business for 33 years in various businesses and so forth, which mostly are Western capitalist type of endeavors where, you have to make money at least to stay in business, but, the whole idea is to make more and to grow. And, that's what everybody is supposed to do. Right. And so, I was on that treadmill for a long time, and, I did however I did. Right. And now I'm at a point where I've been, I guess you could say, illuminated to the idea that it's time to give back, right? To be in service. And so this activity and a couple of other things that I'm involved in as well are in that vein. So this water company is not one that will ever be like Fiji. It will never be something that grows and that you buy in Whole Foods. There's not that much of it, right? And so really, I've been tasked with bringing this water to the people who are both ready for it and are searching for it and need it, right? So that's how I see this activity. And that's what's happened to me since I got on the water trail is that a series, I call them angels. People have come and guided me, brought information and or exposed me to things. And now I'm at a point where I literally ask some of the questions that I want to have answered. And that information just comes to me. Sometimes it's in the form of, I have all these books, and of course you can't read every single thing, right? Or you'd spend all your time reading and not doing.
Right.
And so, but often I find I'm drawn to a book for reasons I don't understand. And I can tell you, at first it became a curiosity, how when I opened the book to a page, that it was something there that was important that I'd been asking or thinking about, and the answer's there, or a piece to the puzzle is there. And so that's what I mean by being guided, right? To surrender to what my mission is anyway.
The synchronicities of the universe being brought
very
to
much
your awareness when you ask the right questions. That's
very much
it's
so.
law. It's universal law. That's what, the mystics have been telling us for eons, and you are in a masterful place with that. And that's an amazing space to be.
It's a wonderful space to be in. And I get up every morning excited about the possibilities, right? And the water really has those benefits I talked about with regard to things on the elemental level, but there's actually a higher purpose. And I think that's what speaks to what your original question was a couple of questions ago, and that is about frequency.
Yeah.
So it turns out that silica is also the basis for quartz. Quartz crystals are just highly structured versions of silica.
Interesting.
And they are hexagonal in nature.
Yes.
So they're the same structure as water. And so it makes some sense that there's an ability for silica crystals, or just the basis for those silica, to be a medium through which information can be transmitted.
Oh my God. So what you're saying right now is, when people meditate and are trying to connect with the source, and well, not trying to, but are through intentional living, having more silica in your body will amplify the unfoldment of the higher frequency of your existence on the planet.
I think that's an accurate way to put it. I might also add to that in that world of meditation, what is meditation? Meditation is we'll call it organized thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you're in that flow, they sometimes call it, that your thoughts are in harmony. Okay. On some level, right?
Coherence, right?
Coherence, harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And so what then happens is that vibratory information, it becomes electrical in nature as well, because we are, after all, as Oshman has suggested and others, we are electrical beings, right? Yes. And so those vibrations become electrical in nature. And what happens is that vibrational intention or connection or pattern gets transmitted to the cells. And the cells understand exactly what that is, because that's exactly how cells are operated. And I like to say, and maybe you can appreciate this, that there's two ways to look at human beings. One is that we are biochemical machines, which seems to be certainly true. I think of that as looking at us from the bottom up, and that we are vibratory electrical machines from the top down.
Yes.
So the vibration and electrical activity in our body is what stimulates the biochemical reactions, which we know and Western medicine knows a lot about.
Yes.
And in fact, that's the basis for treatment, right? Is with pharmaceuticals generally,
Yeah.
right? But if you think about there being another way in, so to speak, from the top, and I would suggest maybe that's even makes it even more important, is from a vibratory standpoint, that you can actually affect changes in your body, your chemistry, through meditation.
Mhm.
And there are other approaches as well. Prayer works.
Mhm.
And what I'm going to talk about is a version of that, where because of the silica crystals in the water, forming an idea in your mind is thoughts or vibrations, right?
Yes.
They become
Yes.
electrical. And we're able to do this, pass that thought or that image often through our heart, which is the great resonator, right? The most important organ in our body, I would argue. And then from our heart, if we push that through our vocal cords as an audible, verbal version of our thoughts or our intentions, and we
Mhm.
speak that into this water that's got these silica crystals in it. Now those silica crystals take that vibratory information and they start vibrating and they hold that. And then you drink it. And what are you doing? You're delivering your intention to your body, because now you drink the water and the water goes in your body, and your cells, of course, know what that
Now
means,
you
because
can mechanize the actual meditative thought.
you can mechanize. This is another approach,
You're blowing my mind. This is so
maybe actually more effective. Meditation's hard. And
yeah.
I think, even for the guys that are doing it in caves for a long time, it's hard. Maybe it gets easier, right? But I think, I have myself been a practitioner personally of doing decrees, which are spoken intentions, right?
Okay.
Sometimes in the form of a sentence, actually, and speaking that into the water and then drinking it, and just having those outcomes manifest.
And over and over again, seeing it over. It's the littlest thing to the largest. Wow. I am
Yeah.
so fascinated with this. This
I
is
mean, I'll just tell you at this point, um, I'll just be honest. I am able to take a glass of the water, and if I have a pain, so for example, in my wrist, like I load a lot of boxes and so forth, right? Being the owner of the company, you end up loading boxes, and boxes are
I
heavy, and after a
understand.
while,
Yes, I
your
do.
wrist, your arms, it's like, oh man. So I'm actually at a point where I can say to the water, the pain in my right wrist is gone. Of course, I'm assuming, right, the future, right? I'm not asking for it to be gone. I'm just telling that this is the outcome that is going to happen, that I want to happen, right? With my heart filled with hope. And I can actually drink the water, push that energy down into that wrist, and I can make pain go away in myself.
I
And I
can't,
think everybody, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
this is the basis of the work that guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza has been doing and
Absolutely.
measuring it. And this is how it works. So you have the thought, but it's not just the thought, it's the feeling. And
Absolutely.
and you have to feel that intention, and that's where the heart comes in,
That's
right?
part of the heart. Yep.
And
And then
my
speak it. The last piece that at least some don't get, but
is to
there are a number of
declare out
people that
loud.
are onto it, that you can just do the decree or the vocal intention. And I think that does work, by the way. I think just speaking it and understanding how powerful us speaking our intention is, I think that's certainly at a level. But this level of speaking it into water, a la Emoto, we're back
Yeah.
to our dear friend Emoto. I think that message gets encoded in the water. In fact, I think the water has its own level of consciousness, which is pretty controversial. I think the scientific community, by and large, thinks of water as just these two elements, hydrogen and oxygen, that
Right.
find each other and, have a nice day. It's deeper than that. And if you think about it on this level, while I said volume-wise, we're born 85% water,
Mhm.
it turns out molecularly, you're probably aware that we are 99.999% water from a molecule standpoint. So
Right.
I can really say, and I've said this before to people, right now, we are water speaking to water.
And electricity, speaking to electricity. Yeah,
Of
the
course.
semiconductor thing. Yeah, I don't argue with that at all. I completely see, and my wheels are just turning so huge right now. Like, I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed, and obviously it's no fateful thing. This is the unfoldment of our lives here, to be able to tell this story and to give people access to this information, and you know, manifested it in a way so that this life's work that you've been guided to do can be heard for the right person at the right time, at exactly the time that they need it. And I know that that's going to happen, and I can't wait for that person, when you are that person, to write in to Uncommon Medicine and let us know how this has impacted your life, because I know personally it's already impacted mine. I definitely am looking forward to doing more of these meditative processes and declarations and intentions as you're talking about. And yeah, this is so fascinating. Okay, there's so many things I want to know yet, and I know our time is getting closer, but I want to learn more about some of the things that you're talking about in regard to silica and deuterium depleted water, and
Right.
and you have a bunch of different kinds of water that you discuss, especially on your website. And I wanted to bring more illumination to that. I mean, I don't know how we can illuminate any more than talking about, you know, the universal law of all that is, which is what we just did. But let's just come bring it back in a little science land again here, and out of the mysticism, which is this one and all the same, as we know.
It is.
But please tell us more about, you know, the silica, deuterium, excuse me, depleted water, the other things that come in contact with.
Yeah, let me circle back to the silica, part of the silica story that I hinted at, but you know, said we'd come back to, and that is, remember, second and third elements in the chain of most prevalent in the Earth's crust: silica and then aluminum. So as it turns out, as you're well aware, I'm sure, that more and more studies are uncovering the fact that aluminum and aluminum toxicity, which is the source of inflammation, not all inflammation, but some inflammation in the body and in the brain, which of course lead to those chronic inflammatory conditions like ALS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, right? So here's a cool thing. Turns out, as I mentioned, that as nature would have it, I like to say, silica binds to aluminum. In the case of plants, you know, because plants are uptaking silica, they're uptaking, you know, nitrogen and all sorts of things from the soil and water and so on, but they're also uptaking aluminum. So what happens with plants, because it's toxic to plants as well, the silica encases the aluminum atoms in a plant to protect the plant from being inflamed, right?
Interesting.
In animals and humans, what happens is the same process, except we expel it by sweating, exercise. Why is exercise so good? Well, at least in part, it's to detoxify ourselves. And part of that detoxification, if you have enough water and enough silica, is to get rid of the aluminum, right? And also we excrete it by urination, right? So remember, I mentioned earlier that the process of aging also can be equated to a loss of silica. So is there any surprise that dementia in the form of Alzheimer's and others shows up predominantly with the elderly, with the people who are, let's call it,
depleted,
compromised with regard to the amount of silica that they have, you know, readily available. So, you know, another reason why this water is so special, and a reason why it's here to be able to help people during this period and to bring attention to the benefits of silica. So it turns out that this water is special in another way that I hadn't really anticipated. And that is, we think of water on Earth, mostly in the oceans, right? But fresh water in streams and lakes and rivers and so on, and in aquifers, as being part of the hydrologic cycle. That is evaporative from whatever source, forms clouds, comes raining back down, fills up rivers and aquifers and so forth, and we have potable water to drink. Turns out that very much like in human beings, the earth makes water in and of itself, right? So remember, number one element in the earth's crust, oxygen, right? Number one element. Hold on. So what else is in the earth's crust? Okay. Mainly hydrocarbons, right? Which we normally drill and refine and run our cars on, right? Methane and so on. In a situation where you have a geothermic area or geothermic activity, heat applied to hydrocarbons breaks the bond between carbon and hydrogen. And I like to call hydrogen a very lonely bachelor because it's positively charged and it's always looking for a partner.
That's so awesome.
What does it find?
Yeah, it is
the most widely available young lady on the block. Oxygen. And in that environment where there's heat, it makes steam. And steam then makes its way through the crust, picking up trace minerals, of which silica is one. And here we go. The water comes out of the ground at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and it has never been to the Earth's crust, the Earth's surface before. And we capture it immediately. So when we talk about purity of water, this is another level.
Wow. Yeah.
Of purity. So there is something, I think, that is special in that way, that people are concerned about things like lead and other contaminants that get into water that has been in the municipal water system, which won't kill you, right? It'll keep you alive, I like to say. But I don't feel like when I drink it anyway, that it allows me to thrive. And I think that that's what this water does. You instinctively know, your cells know, your body knows. It's like, okay, this is something special, right? So there's another layer to that. It turns out also that this water is deuterium depleted. Now, this is a difficult area.
I haven't heard about this either. I'm really
So here's the story with regard to deuterium, and I say that with quotes because, well, I want to say it gently because there's probably something there. We don't really know enough about it. There are some really important scientists that are studying deuterium, which is the basis for what is referred to as heavy water. Okay. Right. So it's a water molecule that has an extra neutron, right? So it's heavier than just a proton and electron which is the basis for hydrogen. And then, you've got this oxygen molecule, which has, a lot of protons and neutrons and electrons in it and so forth. And all these things add up to a certain weight. But it turns out if you add, deuterium is what's referred to as an isotope of hydrogen, right? Yeah. And it's heavier.
Okay.
Right. So why does that matter? So it turns out if you measure ocean water measures about, I think it's about 152 parts per million of deuterium water molecules, water that has deuterium attached to it, right? So it's naturally occurring, right? It's not something man did, it just happens. And anytime you have something that is less than 152 parts per million, it's called deuterium depleted because it's less. So that's kind of the benchmark,
Okay.
if you will.
Okay.
So this water, the silica source water from the spring, is about 17% lower in deuterium content than ocean water. So that puts the context on it. Now,
Okay.
in order to understand what at least science thinks right now about why deuterium is bad for us, right, is that it has to do with these little rotors that are supposedly, I've never seen one, to be honest, but these little rotors that are part of our microtubules in each cell. And they are supposedly the engines of the cell that provides energy to the cell. And that hydrogen atoms are what run these little mechanical machines. I promise you, this is what the science is.
Well, I'm sure
And
that
so,
spectrometry is right at this
so
point.
think of it this way. So these little hydrogen atoms are running this impeller, you know, and along comes this deuterium atom, right? Which is bigger, it's fatter.
Okay.
And so it's stuck and it gums up the process. And so the cell doesn't have as much energy, right? As a result of the fact that this thing's, you know, compromised.
It's clogging up the cogs. Right?
Exactly. In fact, if you go and look into some of the deuterium research, some of the animations show exactly that, right? Now, again, I can't say that that's exactly what's going on because I haven't really seen one of these things in action. And in fact, no one has, right? We can't get down to that level with our ability to look microscopically at things. But that's the theory as to why deuterium depleted water should be more healthful for us because it would lead to more energy in the cells. And of course, that's what we're all after, more energy.
Okay. So more energy output because of better uptake, because there's less clogging of the natural systems that bring it in. I see too. And that is also kind of the premise behind what was the other thing the surface tension? Is that the same kind of?
No, it turns out surface tension is important, but that's a whole different issue, right?
Okay.
So surface tension is a characteristic of fluidics, right? So anything fluid, oil, water, you know, anything you can think of that's in its fluid state, right? You can talk about this notion of surface tension, right? And it's at an interface. So when you look at the surface of water, if you have, and you've probably seen this happen before, a high surface tension water, you can actually float a penny on. Right. It'll just float. Right. Now, lower surface tension would then have that fall through. And so what is it about surface tension that's important? Well, it turns out that this universal solvent, water, if you have high surface tension water, it's not easily absorbed into the tissues. And it's not easily combined with other molecules because there's a, you know, you could think of it like as a tough shell on the outside that's more difficult to penetrate, right? And so high surface tension water, like the water from municipalities and reverse osmosis water. And you know, I'm not being critical of either of those sources of water. Just that's a characteristic, you know, it's not
it's just the science. It's the science of the water. That's all.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. But it turns out that this water is low surface tension relative to those. All water has surface tension, but it's low relative to that. So number one, more easily absorbed into the tissues. So more ability to hydrate. So this would be especially important for athletes, right? That have concerns about, you know, losing a lot of that water through dehydration and then trying to replenish it, but it not being easily replenished.
Sure.
The other thing that is cool about low surface tension is that it more easily absorbs other molecules. So for example, in making tea or coffee or even cooking with this water is going to naturally extract more of the taste profile of those other molecules, right? Which of course, when I say taste profile, I really mean vibratory activity, because it turns out that every one of our senses is a vibratory activity, right?
Yeah.
So let's just talk about the ability of the water to absorb more vibratory patterns and information.
Makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. And oh God, again, there's so many things, so many things.
We have to come back and talk again, I guess.
We do. Honestly, Michael, I mean, I seriously could go for another hour with this and get like to really deep dive into more of the sciencey kinds of things. But what I would really love to do right now is to give people access to how they can find the water, how they can contribute to its sustainability, how we can find you. Just give us all of your information so we can find you in the water.
Yes. So I think the best way is on the website, right? All roads lead to aquenesprings.com, AQUENE springs.com. And Aquene, by the way, is a native word that has a number of different interpretations. One is peace, another is clarity and tranquility. So that's where that came from. And where this water comes from is in the high desert at about 7,500 feet, literally in the middle of nowhere. And so it is a very tranquil and peaceful place. And it's a place that was known millennia ago to the Native Americans that inhabited that area at the time as a place of healing. They would go and bathe in the water. The water has an ability to be stored, and they would take it on hunting trips and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it's got a nice history to it. And I think what we're going to do is to all of your listeners extend a special discount code. And I think what should we call it? Uncommon?
Uncommon, yes.
Uncommon. Let's make that a code for a special discount for all of your listeners.
Thank you so much. It's so generous and lovely. And I just have to go back to one more thing. Half-life. There's not a half-life for the water, because you do just mentioning this with taking on hunting trips. Because like some people will drink alkalinized water, and over time the alkalinized water gets less and less alkaline. Will this will the water from this spring stays consistent?
Yeah, so let me just say as well for people, and I'm actually kind of glad we didn't get down the pH road, the alkalinity
road. That's a whole other thing.
It's a very dangerous road to travel on. And the only reason I say that is because we still just don't understand.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Alkaline water is better for us. Studies indicate that it is. The Japanese have known this for a long time. And of course, those machines, the Kangen machines that were developed in Japan, which a lot of people have. And unfortunately, the only downside, I think, to those machines is, well, there's two. One is they use municipal water. And there are issues with municipal water, and we'll call it chaos. The chaos that is involved in it, because it's been through all these processes, it's been through all these crazy pipes and turns and so forth. So it's kind of in a chaotic state, you might say. So, that's a problem that you just can't, there are water structuring devices that I think help with that on the home level, but they don't probably do it entirely. But secondly, with those machines, half of the water goes down the drain. Right. So to produce alkaline water, the normal way to produce alkaline water is through some level of electrolysis. And even these waters, the reverse osmosis waters that are on the market, some of those go through that process. Others just add chemicals to increase the alkalinity.
Yeah,
And
better.
that's what I think you're referring to, that those tend to subside over time.
Right.
This water out of the ground, nothing done to it whatsoever, is naturally pH 8.6.
Okay. Got it.
It's
And
a,
it
I
stays there.
think is a very nice level. Between 8 and 9 seems to be a sweet spot,
Yeah.
right? 7 being neutral, below 7 being acidic. And then of course you have drain cleaner, which
Right.
its alkalinity is 14. So you have to be a little careful about this alkalinity issue. It's a log scale. And so
Yes.
it's
And I
not
was
just the
referring
kids.
to the silicon though. The silica
Yeah,
is
no, the silica
that
is
always
absolutely stable,
okay.
100%. The
Okay.
only thing I would say, and this is true of any water, right? If you take a bottle of spring water, you take tap water, you take, silica source water, you open it up, you put it into a glass and you leave it out on a counter, what's going to happen? Well, first of all, you're going to get a lot of stuff dropping into it because the air is full of stuff, right? Dust and so on. And also you're going to get some level of oxygenation, right? So there's an oxidative process that happens, certainly at the interface, and it changes the taste, right? So sometimes you'll get water that tastes a little bit stale because it's been out, a glass of water that's been out and so forth. But, if you drink it, in our case, out of the carton or out of the bottle, you're going to get, that's the first time it's ever going to experience the atmosphere, because we capture it before it ever touches the atmosphere.
I am absolutely, I think this is the first time I've done a podcast where I've sat here with my mouth open. So in awe.
Oh,
With all of the
excellent.
information that you shared and with how intimately connected it is to, to the universal principles and the universe and our connectivity to one another, and down to the science and the microbes and everything in between. You just have brought so much amazing information through this talk that we've just been able to have together, and I'm so incredibly grateful. And again, I just wanted to repeat, if people want to get in touch with you, they should go to Aquene.
Aquenesprings.com, AQUENE springs.com. And I want to leave you with one last notion.
Okay.
And this is information that's been delivered to me. And that is that this water is here with a purpose. And part of its purpose is to allow us as human beings to rediscover our own abilities to heal ourselves and to understand that we are very powerful and we've been given enormous powers, most of which we've forgotten. A lot of this was known back in the ancient world, and we've forgotten it, and we've abdicated some of that responsibility to others. And I think as we enter the Aquarian age, not to get woo-woo, but the truth of the matter is that the Aquarian age is about, taking personal responsibility and about looking within for all that is within us.
And it happens to be Aquarius, aqua, water. Just, you just keep throwing them at me. See, again,
you can't make this stuff up.
You can't. You've been such a joy, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will definitely be in touch, and I cannot wait to have my first taste of your amazing water of God's water, honestly, that you've been gifted for us to find. Thank you so much.
Bye to everyone.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you just left. Okay.